Hey, everybody. It is so exciting to see people from all over the world joining us. I just saw someone from my home state of Oklahoma join. So, hi, Angela. I don't know you, but I love seeing other leaders. Hey, everybody. It is so exciting to see people from all over the world joining us. I just saw someone from my home state of Oklahoma join. So, hi, Angela. I don't know you, but I love seeing other leaders from where I grew up. But anyway, it is so awesome to see people from all over the world joining in chat. And I think this actually shows us, not just as HR leaders, but anyone who's joining this call, the importance of mental fitness and mental wellness at work and why this is such a great thing to talk about. I'm Scott Doman. I'm the Chief People Officer here at Calm. I'm thrilled to be joined today by two extraordinary HR leaders. I'd like to first introduce Kareen Shahar and tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I work currently at Blumhouse, but I have about 20 years of HR experience and across everything from recruitment to, talent development to employee relations and ultimately my passion, which is behavioral analytics, as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm really excited to be here. So thank you so much.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us. And I'm also thrilled to have a partner here on a lot of things that I work on all day long. James, please introduce yourself to our panel, to our audience.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Calm, and thank you to everyone worldwide. I'm honored to be here with Kareen and Scott today. My name is James Nicholas Kinney. I'm the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at Ogilvy, and I'm also our North American Chief People Officer. Just want to report to this audience that I'm on a 48-day streak on my Calm app, and I've done over 1,000 sessions. So I've been a user of Calm for a really long time, and I'm a survivor of agoraphobia, anxiety, and depression.
Thank you for that, James. And I will just kick off with that. I mean, one of the things we talk about a lot is how we actually lean into the vulnerability of being able to talk about those things that we are all dealing with on a day-to-day basis. With showing that level of bravery and that level of insight, James, could you tell us more about, how you encourage that at Ogilvy and in your people leaders and things like that, so that people are actually sharing their stories to be able to make it okay and tell everyone on their teams that it's okay to talk about the importance of mental wellness and mental fitness?
I take those cues from Kareen. I take those cues from you, Scott. Because we're friends outside of work, right? So the thing that I take from Kareen, like when we were talking, it's like, HR, it doesn't traditionally have that bravery and that courage and that vulnerability because of the stigma of being an HR professional. But we keep it real, and when we do that, our people are so much more apt to be real also when they're having a problem instead of potentially hiding it. And Scott, you've always taught me just to be real and just get straight to the point. So the way that I implement that in, whether we're doing like a global town hall or regional town hall, or just today, I had a note going out about an email phishing scam. And at the very end, I said, and make sure you're drinking water, taking regular breaks, and clearing space in your mind. So even if it was like an IT security email, I was like, I'm just going to put in a little bit of there because as many opportunities that I can get to pepper in mental fitness, as you say, at Calm, is really what I like to do.
That's awesome. What about you, Kareen? How do you, lean into that vulnerability and share those things to make it okay for everyone else?
Well, I think, 7 years ago I had cancer, and it was actually the best thing that ever happened to me. And I kind of call it my dark gift. And I think surviving that and being a single mom, you really do have to. I feel like a huge sense of responsibility to help people not get to the place that I got to at 38 years old, which is, working 24/7, trying to be the perfect mom, trying to be the perfect partner, and really just realizing that I need to exist in all of that. And so, the big thing for me now is kind of being vulnerable in that respect with people, showing that I'm a human, even though traditionally that's not really acceptable from HR people. But I do believe that ultimately by me being vulnerable, I allow for other people to be vulnerable. I'm also a coach and do this great, profiling test that helps me support people to get them back to their true self, right? So I think it's about giving people the tools to also find themselves and create plans that aren't impossible plans, like baby steps to get better. Like, okay, every week I'm going to do an hour of exercise, and then 3 weeks later you do 3 hours. So I think, just kind of allowing yourself to make the change slowly, and being kind to yourself through that process as well.
I love that. I mean, thank you both for sharing, and I'll share too. I mean, it's one of those things, like James said, we're good friends outside of work as well. And my best friend Alex always calls it having your personal board of directors. And I've got to say that, James is on that personal board of directors for me, where I can just go, oh, and, just have that moment where, as HR leaders, people are coming to us for lots of answers and lots of questions for answers, looking for guidance. And I've always found that it's okay to say, like, I don't know. And there's so much power in that. And James and I talked about that a couple of weeks ago, where it's just like, I just needed to say, like, how do I say I don't know? And he's like, well, you always just say it. And I was like, you're right. I just need to say that I don't have the answer, and make it okay for everyone else to not have the answer as well. And, that level of vulnerability and, tapping into, I think many of our heroes, Brene Brown, of like the power in that vulnerability and the, removal of the shame of sharing these things, that just both of you sharing your own personal journeys, I think is amazing. And I love seeing both of you in action, to be able to, that's why you're two of my favorite people. It's just like being able to see both of you in action and talking about those things that are real. And we can all come up with the best study or the best thing or the best that, but ultimately it's about us as human beings and being able to like approach our organizations and our personal networks as human beings, not, a title or a level or things like that, of just seeing the human inside all of the work that we're doing day in and day out. So, yeah. And I mean, and one of the things I forgot to mention as I kick this off is, please, if you do have any questions, ask them in the chat. Claire and Miranda from the Calm team are capturing those, and at the end of our chat, we're going to answer a bunch of them. So please throw anything out there that you like, and we'll make sure that we get to it. And one of the reasons we put this fireside chat together is that, with Mental Health Awareness Month in May, where a lot of organizations and people leaders are focusing on the importance of mental health and mental fitness, one of the things that Corinne and James and I have talked about is that it isn't just in May. This is a year-round 365 activity that all of us have to both give back to ourselves, but also focus on for our employees as well. And right before this call, we were having a quick sync, and Corinne, you raised something really interesting about, the multiple generations that are in the workplace right now, and I think some really phenomenal perspectives that you have. And I'd love to turn this over to you to share some of your insights.
I think one of the things that doesn't get talked about a lot is that we are 3 generations in the workplace. You have the boomers, the Gen Xers, and the millennials. And I think that's 3 completely different perspectives, right? So we're all coming in with our, value systems and how we were raised, and millennials are demanding that they can bring their full self to work. And I think Gen Xers are really open to it because, frankly, I don't think we loved the way we were managed by boomers. But then, the boomers are trying to be open and they're trying to be flexible, but that's years and years of behavioral patterns that they now have to shift. And so it's actually not so natural. And I think I'm a person of balance and moderation. And so I think, empathy and understanding where everyone is coming from and doing it in a way that makes everybody feel okay to bring it to the table, right? So it might be that, one of my boomer leaders doesn't want to share how he feels, but maybe he's going to see that someone's not doing well. And I think you can do it in a way that's comfortable for you, I guess is the point, right? So it might be that, someone reaches out to someone and says, hey, I see that you're not doing well, and I just wanted to check in on you. And you know what? That can go a long way. But I think there's no one way to do things. And, I think, yes, should people feel safe, psychologically safe in the workplace? Absolutely. I think that's the most important thing. But I also think we have to be mindful of how we roll things out so that people really buy in, because otherwise what we're seeing now happen is a rebellion against it, right? With Basecamp and other companies, and even employees sometimes who don't want to see the note, about the Chauvin trial. Well, some people need that note, right? So how do you find that kind of balance? And it's a tricky one, right? And I think different companies are figuring out what works for them. And honestly, people are joining companies based on values now, and
I agree.
right.
That's a very good point. And you raise a really interesting topic that I've been reading and hearing a lot of, different perspectives on that notion of whole self and bringing your whole self to work. Do you have a perspective on that about what it does mean to bring your whole self to work?
Well, I think it's inevitable, right? Like it's unavoidable to bring your whole self to work. I mean, COVID, of course, working from home, my kids were Zoom bombing is what I call it. I was stuffing my face, eating while other people are talking on calls. They saw me making breakfast for my kids, getting them ready for school. So I think vulnerability is like, it is there. People have seen my full life. I do think that there's times and places though, at the same time, you are running a business and you do have to get the work done. So I think again, it's figuring out a way to find that balance so that you can feel safe, you can get what you need from your workplace. But ultimately for me as an HR person, I want to give people the tools to be able to do it themselves, right? Like that's because they may not work at Blumhouse forever. But if they leave Blumhouse with like a toolkit to make them successful moving forward, then I feel like I've done my job.
That's great. James, what about you? I mean, this is a really great topic about multiple generations, bringing yourself to work, and all of the variables, as Corinne was pointing out, that we're dealing with today. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'll really just double down and echo what Kareen said. The way that I articulated it during my latest interview process is that if we could create a backpack, and in this backpack, you have your Rambo knife, you have fishing twine, you have matches, you have water, you have everything that you need to succeed, regardless of the generation, if they have the resilience to allow themselves to show up fully, be productive, add to the triple bottom line, right? Then that's really what I think HR is becoming and should be going towards as an industry. This is not, this is an agnostic point of view that whether you're managing 50 people or 50,000, it's important that our ripple impact on society is that people become better. And I'm really bullish, and that I believe that business can solve societal problems because government takes a very long time. But if you get a calm that happens, right, whomever the person is that came up with the idea to create calm, now look at the ripple impact years later. There's 2,000 of us on the phone today. There's hundreds of employees, and there's millions of people around the planet that are developing these skills and tools. So then you get a James, then you get all 702 of you. That's a real ripple effect. I mean, that's powerful stuff, and that's counter to what we see on TV, that everything is shit and everything is bad.
Yes.
I think that's a really excellent point. I mean, this goes to like one of the things that I talk about a lot too, is that, with people managers and just with like the human condition we're all existing in, it's caring more and just being able to say like, how are you doing? No, really, how are you doing? Because I think it's easy right now to say, I'm fine. And I think one of the things that the last like 18 months has taught us is it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not be fine. And I think, especially at work where, we're bringing our whole selves, we're seeing the, cats and kids and dogs and spouses and everything from, the true self that we are. I think that, the notion of being able to work in this Zoom environment over the past several, 18 months, it's one big day to me at this point, has shown us that like, we need to stop apologizing. We need to like be more open. We need to be able to say like, yep, this is the cat just meowed or I just dropped water on myself, and it's okay. It doesn't make me any less or better good at my job. It's just like, here we are and this is me. And I think it's a really powerful thing for us as leaders, and particularly as HR leaders, to be able to show up with that and show that like you're just a human being who's trying their best, and you're going to get stuff right, and you're going to get stuff wrong, and you're going to have days that aren't so great. And it's when you become comfortable with that, and to your point, James, on like when you realize that sort of diaspora of experiences that you have and that you bring every day, you just find your way through like how you work, and you're more authentically you in your day-to-day interactions. It's all very exciting.
I agree. Well, but I was super touched when you guys rolled out your free free com for HR professionals. It was like the first moment I felt like in a year that anyone had been like, "Oh, HR, you got here, right?" And we really have. We really have. I mean, as someone who's been doing this for 20 years, this was the hardest year ever. And I have a small, staff of 70 people. So I thank you for that, because I thought that was just incredibly innovative and kind.
Well, thank you for saying that. I mean, all credit to, like, for instance, with Miranda and Claire on the phone, like really asking, like, what can we do for the HR community and the people who are doing so much for the largest number of people every day. And I was like, wow, you know what? I've actually never had anyone ask me that. I was like, what an incredible thing to come from, like, I never thought about that. I was like, that is so brilliant. And I'm glad that it had such a positive impact on you. And it seems like many people on the chat on this call have had a positive impact on them as well. Because that's for us here at Calm. Like, we think about this as, we want to make the world a happier, healthier place. And our co-founders will oftentimes say, we're here to be part of solving the world's mental health crisis. And if we can do that by virtue of connections with HR leaders or through our content on a consumer basis, we're going to do it because it puts that level of good and that level of change into the world. And to your point on people joining companies because of values in their mission these days, I'm glad that, like, we all get to think about that every day and do our level best, regardless of, like, if it's Blumhouse or Ogilvy or Calm or the many organizations that are represented here. I'm saying, like, how do I bring that into the everyday, and how do I put that fingerprint of just doing a little bit more for myself or for the team, or thinking about people where you're like, gosh, I wonder if someone's asking that person if they're doing okay, or if someone's thought about them. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's amazing. It's amazing. And I think for James and I, we've both started at new organizations over Zoom, and have not met that many people in person. James, I'm curious as to your experience, having just recently joined Ogilvy, of, like, what it's like to start in a virtual world, and any insights that you have for people who are on this call about what it means to create an onboarding and a welcoming experience for people when, hey, we're not physically around each other anymore.
Yeah, I think 2 points to that. First, to kind of like nerd out on the neuroscience tip, right? Of this, we're missing these, people call it like the kitchen moments, or the water cooler moments, or the hallway moments, right? But there's neuro cues that we receive from other human beings that are about trust, right? So if you've ever been to the Caribbean and you see like stray dogs that are like walking around, and like the dogs don't look at you because like they're not trained to interact with human beings, and they kind of have a distrust because every day they're fighting for scraps, right? But then you get like a house dog that loves humans, and they look at you with puppy dog eyes. That's kind of the best analogy on the fly that I can make up. But I think we're missing the neuro cues because our minds are telling us, I think I know this person, but I've only met them 2D via the screen. Yet I have this pressure on me to deliver on the project or XYZ that I'm doing. So I think teams have been able to be successful, yes, but is it sustainable long term? No, because there was a Harvard Business Review article that I really liked about this. It's called The Neuroscience of Trust, and that you need all senses to connect with another human being in order to do your best work. There has to be that. So we're kind of operating with like half the cylinders that we would because it's a Zoom environment. A tactic that I've been using. So I manage a staff of about 70 folks. I have about 2,400 in North America and about 14,000 globally. And one thing that I've been doing as a tactic to make authentic connections is just doing like 15-minute meetings with my staff members, or even 10-minute meetings. Thanks, Myra, excuse me, for putting that in the chat. But those 15-minute meetings where we don't talk about anything work related, and we share stories of children, dogs, cats, vacations, eating, mental fitness, and other things, that's helped me get more dialogue around who people actually are, and kind of taking off your cool, so to speak. So that's helped, but it's not a replacement for getting all those sensory inputs and really having those neuro cues of trust that we need. So we do need to eventually get back to meeting people in real life.
Amazing. How about you, Kareen? How have you found that, some tips that you've discovered over this year of building that trust and really bringing people into the organization and building those connections that are authentic while we are all in this 2D environment?
Well, I've actually hired a lot of people at the beginning of this year. So I have like 12 new hires who started, and I created like a 30-day plan for them to really immerse themselves in our culture, which was like a mix of like watching podcasts of our president Jason Blum speak, or reading different scripts that were really meaningful and just understanding the stories behind that, but also literally curating a list of all the people that they need to meet with. And making sure that they're meeting with them. And also, one of the things that I do is this personality profiling, which I mentioned earlier, but I take everybody through each other's profile. So within the first week of someone starting, I take them through their entire department, right? So they're already understanding all the behavioral patterns within their department and per individual. So there's an immediate ramp up in getting to know each other and how people like to work, which I think is super important because figuring that out remotely is incredibly challenging. And then, and I do the coaching as part of the interview process, right? So within the first meeting at Blumhouse, I'm already breaking down all the walls and being fully vulnerable with people. They're being vulnerable with me. And it creates a dynamic where I'm no longer seen as like an HR robot, but a human who really genuinely cares about their growth and is invested in their success. So I found that is really helpful. But we're also doing like monthly speaker series around different topics, which is helping, educate ourselves, do the work, remove some of our biases. And weirdly, we weren't able to do that when we were at the office because I didn't have a room big enough to fit everybody. So it's been a good excuse to get everyone together. And I think I check in with the employees on a rotation every 2 months. So I'm constantly checking in because I used to rely on my kitchen and water cooler time to really run into people and talk to them. So, because not everything, people don't usually come to HR just to say hi. So I've like forced this kind of connection, and then I'm checking in with managers to let them know who I'm worried about, who should be paid attention to. And I think that's what I really enjoy about being at a small company is I really have a personal relationship with people, and I think it's something I really enjoy personally.
Awesome. Well, you raised another really good point around, connecting with managers, and really, a lot of my philosophy is seeing managers as a single point of success and failure. During these times where, focusing on mental wellness and coaching managers to pay attention to those cues without being armchair psychologists. How have you and James balanced that, and how have you both found, effective ways on coaching managers towards those behaviors?
Well, it was cool. I literally did this morning. Like I literally had a call this morning about this, and basically I was taking the manager through. Listen, it's tough, right? I remember earlier in my career, I tried to be the savior and the hero of the population, and I realized I would burn myself out. If you let every employee into your office back when we had the office, your little curtain or your closed HR door, and you're coaching and you're working like, I'm about to have a baby, I'm getting a divorce, all the things that we've supported people through, you just get worn out, right? So learning later in my career, 19 years in, that the better managers, to your point, Scott, that we can create, the better we're going to be. But there's still a major disconnect, in my opinion, that managers don't think their job is to lead and or to manage. That if they became a vice president because they could sell or because they could solve problems, but then we have to remind them like, no. Your job is to care for this population. Number one, yes, you need to deliver the bottom line. But so this morning I took a person through a thing and I said, listen, frequent and regular breaks matter. We're 15 months into this, and it's your responsibility to make sure that your people are taking time off. So when one of your people are going to my HR leaders and saying I'm super burnt out and my manager doesn't care, I'm now going to you and saying that you're going to mandate that they take time off as one thing that you're going to do. You're also going to be very clear that these 27 people that are under your remit, their health and welfare is your responsibility. And when I speak to them that way, they learn very clearly that, my people necessarily can't solve all of your problems. We are here to support and help you. But the first line of defense is you. And it's going to cost you money if that person quits. It's going to cost you money if they burn out. And ultimately, let me just be very clear as a KPI for your performance review, that their mental health is actually your responsibility. If you don't want that job, we can talk about a salary reduction. We can talk about some other employment opportunities for you. But let me be abundantly clear, boo-boo, that this is your job.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I always talk about that too, where it's like, being a manager is a job. Being a great engineer or a great salesperson or a great HR leader is not your job when you're managing people. Your
Right.
job are the people in front of you,
Yes.
that you are engaging with, in the modulation and the context switching. You have to go from human to human to human in terms of their, life experience, their professional experiences, their interaction and reaction with the things that are going on day to day. And that's what you got to pay attention to. So I'm glad that you're like, we could talk about all the other things we could do, but your job is to manage. So, Kareen, what about you?
Well, I mean, I had the same journey as James. I mean, I got myself so sick that I got cancer, right? That's how much I was worried about people and wanting to overcompensate for the lack of leadership that existed. Right? So it's a completely natural thing that happens in HR. I think, I chose HR because I genuinely care about people. Like it is a core value of mine. So I think when I see people suffering unnecessarily, or it's just an easy tweak, it can make me crazy. I have learned with age and sickness and life that, this is not a healthy way to function. But I have no problem having the hard conversation with my managers when I feel like they are not stepping up. Um, but I also provide them with training. I mean, I'm doing it right now. We're doing it every month. We have a new course to learn, and it's 45 minutes. I make it really simple for people to attend. They walk away with a little cheat sheet, and I expect them to practice that stuff.
Yeah.
And I hold them accountable to it. And I even do employee-led reviews because I actually want employees to give feedback to their managers of what they need more of, and then it allows me to see that as well, so then I can support the manager and hold them accountable to giving it to them. So yeah, I think James and I are a lot alike in that way. We have a lot of empathy, and we ourselves have to set a boundary, and we do that by holding our managers accountable to also doing their part. It cannot always fall on HR to solve
Great.
everything. And in fact, I think HR gets too much of a blame if something goes wrong, whereas I think the leaders really should be held far more accountable.
Right. And I'm seeing some questions in the chat that I just want to call out, particularly because we have a global audience with us today. We saw people from the UK, from Canada, from South Africa, from all over the world. And, seeing these things about how, mental wellness, mental fitness, and even some of these coaching that we're giving to managers may very well be, conversations that people aren't comfortable having globally. I'm curious with both of you, how do you think about mental fitness, mental wellness, and that coaching for managers from a global scale, in the sense of, how do you think about the diversity of that country by country? How do you promote those and communicate and talk about those things? James, I'll start with you in terms of, you said you've got 14,000 people globally. Yep. How do you think about that and modulate across multiple cultures in multiple countries?
Yeah, well, the first thing is that the human experience is truly global, as we all know. And COVID taught us that very clearly, that the disproportionate impact on society is very real. I was listening to The Economist the other night, and they said the actual death numbers for COVID are more like 10 million, even though it's officially recorded at like 3.5. And it's because poor people in other nations, unfortunately, even the record keeping is not the same. So taking that into DEI and over to mental health, DEI record keeping from a governance standpoint of nations is also very different. What we consider to be inclusive and diverse in Latin America, in Asia, and in Europe and in Africa is very different. So we have specific strategies and leaders in those markets that I work with in order to make sure that those strategies are inclusive of what that culture is. As we know, in certain markets, gender is not the same from a historical standpoint and for now. For example, there's 2 million trans individuals identify as trans in China. A lot of people don't know that. And just to go like, wow, really, in China? But yes. So when we look at all those nuances, it's about making sure that there's bespoke yet inclusive strategies for those markets. Transitioning into mental health as the last point of that conversation, one of the great things that Calm does is that it creates a experience that no matter where you live in the world, most people understand English at a basic level, even if it's your second language. But just through the auditory perspective, right? The way that the brain works, no matter where you are in the world, from an auditory standpoint, and breathing, which is universal as well, those are tools that happen throughout the world. So we lean into the universal tools, which is the breath, which is auditory cues and community. One of the things that I think North America does a poor job at is that community is not the emphasis, where you look at multi-generational homes in different parts of the world that actually add to better health because there's community that are around people. So it's a fascinating chat when we try to run data across our global territories in order to understand those nuances, and it changes frequently as well. So, for example, when Bolsonaro was elected in Brazil, there's a very different way that Brazil is operating now because of a certain leader, and it's a true case study, for better or worse, on leadership in Brazil based off of that president. We've seen it here in the US as well. So even though we don't bring politics into the workplace, there are impacts that happen from leadership that exist throughout these countries. If you're in Russia, your president's the same person for the past 16 years, and it's probably going to be for another 20 years, and you don't really have a option. But if you're LGBTQ plus in Russia, then we know that you can go to jail for expressing yourself, and certainly not in the workplace. So there's a correlation of anxiety and depression associated with not being able to express yourself within those territories as well. A bit long-winded, but I hope that gives people a context to how diverse the diversity challenge is.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, this is exactly why we're so thrilled to have both of you here, is because you have such broad experience, and the diversity of the world and within each country requires that level of thought and intricacy and depth and diving in, where we can't just sort of lift and shift to what, how we may have grown up, how companies we may have been at, and then expect those to be replicated, those experiences to be replicated. We have to dig in and do our own research. And that's one of the things that I spent a lot of time talking to people about in terms of learning about other cultures and things like that, is that it's incumbent on each of us to do our own exploration and learning, where we've got the Google machine in front of us to ask any number of questions and do any amount of digging, HBRs and otherwise fireside chats like this, where it's incumbent on us, not just as HR professionals, but as human beings, to learn more and learn more about those experiences and be involved, aware, and aware of what's going on relevantly. And Corinne, I'll turn this over to you too. How do you think about this from mental wellness, mental fitness from a global standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, before I worked for Blumhouse, I worked for Media Arts Lab, which had like 24 offices around the world, and then before that, I worked for a tech company that had 36 offices around the world. And actually, when I worked at Lectra, they put me through a cultural nuance training, right, to understand what is the difference between Chinese workflow, Korean workflow, and Japanese workflow. Most people don't understand that, but it's very different and very nuanced. And so I do agree with you that it is on us as HR professionals to read, to understand the history, to understand the why they are this way. But one of the things we did at Media Arts Lab that I found to be incredibly useful was we actually had different representatives, the strategists from the different offices, do presentations globally around their culture. Just like the basics of like, what is it like to date? What do people think about work? How do we relate to our parents? Like just basic fundamentals of that culture. And so then the employees globally could understand, oh, well, I'm about to go into this meeting, with the Brazilian team, and what do they value? And so that can really help shape how I communicate to them so that actually they hear what I'm saying, right? And not just are present. And, I think global history is fascinating. And frankly, the world is moving so quickly right now that if you're not tracking on why we ended up the way we did, or the interconnectedness of all these countries together and how we impact one another, you're really going to only see a very tunnel view, right? And what we're seeing today is this extremism on both sides. And I think for me, I'd like to get back to a place of moderation and mutual respect, and openness to other points of view, but obviously based in facts. Sorry, but I do think that I grew up. My family is in France. My father is there, and I grew up traveling back and forth, which was a wonderful blessing, and I'm super grateful for it. And my father, before we would travel, we would read about the history, and as we went through the country, he was like, "This is why they do it this way, and this is why this ribbon is tied this way." And really, growing up as a child, I was very lucky to have a parent who taught me and instilled in me this mutual respect for other cultures, but understanding why they do those things, right? So
That's right. And I mean, it goes along with something that I think we've all talked about is that seek to understand and
yes,
seek to understand, the rationale, the logic, the cultural, the nuance, everything behind the activities and the words that are said to you and then how the words that you say to others and the power of those words. One of my friends would always say, everything in life is timing and tone. And, being aware of that timing and tone and being aware of how those things come across, I think is really important in our jobs. And also like just as, human beings in what we would, as you said earlier, a global human experience over the past, 15 months. And speaking of that experience, I mean, a lot of us and people on this call are thinking about what it means to re-engage, not, with society, but also going back to work and the anxiety that's coming along with that. And I'm curious as to what both of you have heard from, your populations at work, as well as, some of the things that you're doing to, focus on people's mental wellness, as well as address some of that anxiety that comes along with, yet another change and adaptation that we're going through as human beings.
Yeah. Well, so quickly, the results that we have are mixed globally, clearly, but within North America, it's about third, and a third. One third is I don't want to go back to the office. A third is I want a hybrid, which is 2 days a week or 3 days a week. And then the other third is like I want to be in every day. And to Kareen's point, the generational differences there are super clear,
oh,
super clear. And people with kids, pretty consistent, right? And there's some marital stuff going on too, Scott. So maybe y'all can help people with that.
Yeah.
I want to get out of here. I need a break.
Missed that question, pass.
But in terms of what we're doing, so I built a program called 100% You, which is a comprehensive wellness program that's live. So every Wednesday at 10 a.m. PST, 1 Eastern, we do a full hour course. So I hired 4 female coaches, 3 women of color, intentionally, because it's a mashup between wellness and diversity. And these 4 women are incredible, and they cover mind, money, meals, and movement. And I had each of them write a 6-month curriculum prior to the start. So every Wednesday we get together. I have anywhere from 100 to several hundred people join, and it takes them through a journey. They have something to look forward to. So in a very simple way, if you think about a dopamine loop that I'm creating throughout the culture, that's very helpful from a mental health perspective. So the nexus between dopamine and serotonin is happening, and they're learning, to Kareen's point, that they're getting that kit and that tool to be resilient and to continue to learn things throughout the program. And then I'm also speaking to Jim, who's Calm's business to business leader, about bringing Calm into Ogilvy as well, to add a second shot, pun intended, to our overarching wellness plan and program.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I mean, and I'm such a fan of all of the things you're doing. And there's so many things. If you haven't really followed some of James's work, please follow him on LinkedIn, because you're doing amazing work on DE&I with the Force. You're doing amazing things as it relates to, like you said, the mindfulness, the movement, the engagement that you have with people. It's just exceptional. And this is one of those things that I think Kareen and James and I've all talked about, is that you can have those and strategies at work. It's, movement and calm and, your EAPs and the coaching and guidance and all those things that there's so many things we can do, that you listen to your people, you listen to your culture, and then really from an instinct standpoint, Kareen, you'd mentioned this, that you go with what you know and you think is going to be best at that time for your business. And that's where it's I'd love to get your thoughts on some of those things, as James is doing some of the things that you're thoughtful about as people are returning to work and have those varying degrees and beliefs about how they'd like to spend their day.
yeah, I mean, it's a little bit trickier for us. We're much smaller, right? And I think we work in Hollywood and we're making movies and things are moving incredibly fast. And we're also recovering from this last year where it was hard, right? So, I think we will definitely be back in the office. I'm sure of that. And I'm actually not upset about it. I think that we have a really special group of people. It's a smaller group. We all know each other. We all care about each other. But obviously, like, I'm going to be hypersensitive to those who I think are like, oh, re-entry into reality is hard for you. So I'm going to take extra care. And I have that again. I've done the big corporation, and I also just really love getting back to my roots, which is like being close to people and nurturing them. And so I think it is going to be figuring it out as we go. I don't have as many people to take care of, right? Frankly. So it's a different dynamic. Like, I think we might all go do a couple movie gatherings to get together and have a little fun. I think we're planning something where we all get together outside in a beautiful yard and have some cocktails and just reconnect. And so I think giving people time. I'm also really encouraging people to go on vacation this summer, right? Like, I really want people to go decompress, because the thing I did notice is people did not take time off last year at all. And, so we've got Memorial Day, we've got 4th of July, really encouraging people to get away, disconnect, uh, and then I think also with HR, you can't plan for everything. I think you can also just be like, oh, I'm noticing this theme that's happening. Okay, I'm going to address it. But I think already the programs we put into place, we have executive coaching for about a third of my staff right now. They're all going through it. Also, very in line with what James was talking about, like supporting also my underrepresented employees with like the trauma that they've dealt with this year as well. So just staying close to everyone is kind
That's amazing. That's amazing. And what you're both touching on is still, it goes back to, we talked about first, is that human experience and the human that shows up every single day in the job that they're doing. At Calm, we've built in 15 minutes from 10 to 10:15 every day where we can all listen to the daily Calm, and it's all on our calendars and it's blocked. And the great thing is that even if you don't go, your time is blocked so that you can actually like take a deep breath. We've piloted Zoom-free workdays, and we're going to roll that out because that actually, with all of us doing a Zoom-free workday, has been, a real sea change to, how we could actually engage and just get work done. Because what we keep talking about is, we're living at work now, working from home, and we have been for the past 15 months. And just that little bit to say, like, I'm just going to focus on this piece for me and just get some stuff done where it's not my 7 p.m. work. Is proving to be really valuable. And building a mental health days. Everyone, just needs to, again, take a deep breath. And I know we've only got a minute left before Miranda and Claire close us out. But for both of you, one, thank you for being here today. But what are both of you doing for yourselves this summer to take time off, to rest and recharge, and give back to yourselves? So I want to challenge you both as my friends to do that. What do you already have planned?
I'm gonna drop this COVID-20. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna get back in shape.
Well, get your Peloton and we'll do the Cody classes together.
Okay.
What about you, Karine? What are you doing to make sure that you're giving back to yourself?
I'm going to Paris to go see my family. But I haven't seen my father in a year and a half. So the girls and I are hopping on a plane and going to Paris, and then hopping over to where you are in Greece.
Wonderful. Yes.
Back to my European roots, which feeds my soul. Good company, good conversation. And I realize how privileged I am to do that. But my whole family is there. So it is time to see them. I miss them so much.
Wonderful.
But yeah. And then also, I've started a new thing where I have a half an hour break in between every meeting. So I do a Zoom and then a half an hour for myself.
Great.
And while it's hard to stick to, I stick to it, and it's given me such a sense of a little bit more balance and a little bit less like craziness all day in this intensity. So I highly recommend it. I think it's a time of setting some more boundaries, really, like
awesome.
Reset.
I'm glad you're both doing that. I've got Mykonos in the background. I'm taking the first week of July, and my husband and I are going to Mykonos. Then we're probably going to Paris. So maybe I'll see you in Paris.
Yeah, meet in Paris for some.
Exactly. But this is where it's like, you gotta make that time. You gotta keep it sacred. And those half hours of those little breaks that we give each other, or the multi-week vacation, like, we've all got to do it and just give back to ourselves and rest and recharge. Because particularly as HR leaders, like we've all talked about, we're giving so much to our organizations that we've got to give back to ourselves and make sure that we are in the right place to actually be able to show up and do that. And any final thoughts from both of you, again, before we close off and before I turn it back over to Claire and Miranda?
I mean, just that I think that we're like a huge network. HR is this very special group of people who are very self-sacrificing and very giving and really care. And I think our jobs are really hard. And as we're always the middleman. And so I think I send a lot of love and respect to all of you. Like that. What I have to say.
Yeah, yeah, I would just echo that and say very thankful for you, Scott, and you, Kareen, Claire, Miranda, and this entire community. I echo Kareen that I think HR is really unique. I don't know if like finance people around the world are doing this. I don't think they are, and I think marketing people like want to see themselves on stage. So I love HR that we are deeply connected to each other no matter where we work. You just look at each other and go, uh-huh, uh-huh. You know, I just feel really fortunate to be connected to all of you globally.
Same. And I just want to thank you both again. I mean, you're such phenomenal humans and wonderful leaders. Just sharing your ideas today means a lot to me and a lot to everyone on the panel that we're seeing in the chat here. Thank you to everyone who joined us on, for today's Fireside Chat. If you want to reach out to me or James or Kareen, you can find us on LinkedIn. You can drop us an email. And if you are interested in bringing calm into your organization, please reach out to me, Miranda, Claire, and we will help connect you with the right people. So again, thank you to every single person, particularly James and Kareen on this call. I'll turn it over to Claire and Miranda for some final thoughts.
Yes, thank you so much. I just wanted to let everyone know we will follow up with an email with a recording of this session. I'll also take some time to go through the chat. There were so many wonderful resources shared. So we will do some work compiling those so we can share those out as well. Thanks again.
Thank you.